Hey, special educators, I'm Jennifer from Positively Learning. Welcome to the Special Educators Resource Room. If you're like me, you're always looking for ways to save time and streamline your work. That's why this podcast was created, to give you the systems and solutions you need to get your time back. Tune in for tips, tricks, and tools that will help you manage your workload and make the most of your time. Whether you're brand new or experienced, all are welcome in the Special Educators Resource Room. 101 free task box ideas. How does that sound? Hey, special educators, it's Jennifer from Positively Learning, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. I have a free download for you. I'll put the link in the show notes, but I don't want to just give you a list of things to do, but instead give you some ideas of how this can help you. This is especially for the special educator who is thinking about implementing an independent work system, however, is not fully committed to the idea yet. They'd rather try it out to see if it's going to work for their students. And that sounds like a perfectly reasonable plan to me. Before we dive in, I do have something very timely to share with you, and I've never done this before on this podcast, but this one feels really important. It is a huge bundle designed for special educators, and it's available only until October 1st, so you definitely want to check this out if you're listening to this in real time. I'll put the link in the show notes. You want to check it out if you're interested in getting a huge set of resources. I think it's over 30 resources from special education authors you're most likely familiar with. If you're interested in reading, math, behavior support, social emotional learning, you definitely want to check this out. There are social narratives, task cards, token boards, visual aids, adapted books, and so much more. So I will put the link in the show notes. All right, moving ahead to our free task box ideas. Let's get started. We all know that there's no one size fits all to student learning, and this has never been more true when we're thinking about independent work. So that's why I love task boxes. You can tailor them to address your students' needs. Essentially, you could have the same task box activity, but you could differentiate it with so many different access points. We also know that task boxes are really quick. They are quick bite-sized tasks, which are designed to offer quick success for our students at their independent level, and that increases engagement. Quick side note, all of these factors I'm listing is why I did make the big switch to task boxes, and I quickly became obsessed. Previously, I used centers, which tend to be larger class size. I may do the prep work and they would last a week, 2 weeks, a month. And what happened was they were definitely not one size fits all. And in fact, I found that a handful of my students were getting exactly what they needed. Some students were interacting with resources that were too easy for them or too complex, and it may not have matched their interest level. With these smaller task boxes, my students are doing several of them. They may be doing 3 in one sitting. And that way, if one is not quite right, maybe the next one is. With centers, I just didn't have that flexibility. So fast forward, as my obsession with task boxes grew, I knew I wanted to get as many different tasks out there to teachers. So I created the Task Box Dollar Club, which is a membership. I think the all access level right now has 175 different tasks in it. That the idea is not to print and prep all of them, but to be able to pick and choose what's going to match what your students need. So what I did is I created this membership, and I noticed a couple of things. There are 2 questions that I get asked, I would say maybe 3 times a week, maybe more. And one question is, what grade level are these tasks for? And I think that teachers are, of course, thinking about their own classroom, their students' needs, and trying to maybe label where these task boxes would fit in. And of course, my answer is, these are not grade level, they're skill level. We know that we can have a 6th grader working on the same skills as a 1st grader. And this leads me to the next question I'm always asked, and something I'm keeping in the forefront of my mind every month as I load new resources to the club, and that is age appropriateness. We may have that upper elementary student, that 5th grader, 6th grader, 7th grader working on the same skills like letter sound correspondence or number recognition. And are these tasks appropriate? When you have centers, sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. Or maybe is age appropriate for this student, but not for another. All things to consider when you are choosing the right tasks for your students. So now let's get to these free ideas. These ideas are really helpful if you do have task boxes and you want to differentiate them, or if you're just getting started and you don't have a single task prepared yet. Let's get to it. The good news with this free download is that there are 101 fun and educational activities for you. The bad news about this is that they are just listed out. They are not listed by skill or content area. So what I want you to do is think about these as, okay, I already know the skill and content area. Now I want to think about accessibility. What can I do to make these more accessible? Let's start with one of my favorite ideas. You may have a student that is interacting with content area. And let's just choose social emotional learning. And you know that the student needs to stay with this content area. They are definitely benefiting from it. However, you can't just take one task and do it over and over again. So how can you continue to interact with the social emotional learning concept? Let's say it's growth mindset. How can they continue to interact with that content, but in different ways so that student is still engaged, but they're also still getting that same skill? So a couple of ideas. One is my favorite, is using a sort. You can sort by growth mindset and fixed mindset. You can sort by a positive and a negative. You can sort any which way. Sorting activities are higher order thinking for our students. It can help them access the content area in a way that's appropriate for them. In the free download, I've listed so many different ways that you can sort. Staying with the SEL, you could sort by growth mindset, as we mentioned, but also by emotion or by kind versus unkind. Moving past that, you could sort by function, thinking about utensils, things students use every day, even school supplies from your classroom. You could organize into a task box and have students sort by function. You could also sort by object, parts of the house, parts of speech, clothing, by weather or by season. So many different ways you can sort. On the flip side, you could also do matching activities. In fact, you could use many of the exact same resources. After students sort them, then they can also make matches. You can match emotions. You can match job titles to their workplace or their occupation. You can match 3D pictures to real photos, matching textures to descriptive words, matching animals to habitats. So many different ideas listed on this download. So sorting and matching is our go-to. However, there's another idea that I used all the time, and that is adding some type of fine motor component. Now, I knew that that was something my students would benefit from, but there's another reason I used it, and I'm pretty sure this is not a best practice, so take this with a grain of salt. But I found that my students were always whipping through independent work activities, and I wanted them to slow down because I knew that was going to benefit them to interact with the content even more. And I found that and using some type of fine motor activity not only increased engagement, but it also slowed my students down. So how would you do this with a SEL concept or a math concept or something for literacy? Well, this download has tons of ideas. One way to add a fine motor component is to have some kind of connect the dots as students are interacting with the content, whether it's a actual connect the dot graphic, or you are listing different pictures and students are connecting those. Another idea is having some type of cutting task, if that is appropriate to your students, adding some type of dotted line around the activities or a dotted line that students can cut, or they could even trace. Students could trace around a picture or trace a line, connecting one picture to another to make a match. I like using traceable font where students are interacting with the content, but they're also practicing letter or number formation. If you're feeling brave, you could do some fine motor sculpting activities by adding Play-Doh. You could turn a connect the dot activity into lacing by laminating, hole punching, and adding a shoelace. And of course, you could just add hands-on tools like letter tiles or cubes that students can use to build a word or represent a number concept. Another way to differentiate student learning is to incorporate visual motor skills. How often do we get to work on skills like that? However, it can be really simple to add this to our students' tasks. This could look like finish the picture or matching items by shadow or completing simple mazes. Maybe even adding this to our fine motor tasks. Students could follow a maze to match one picture to another. So many different ideas, way too many to list right now. So I'm going to wrap it up here and leave a link to a blog post. It's called 101 Taskbox Ideas. Lots of good information in there, and there's a link to grab this free download. In the show notes, I'll also put a temporary link to the bundle deal. If you're listening to this after October 1st, I am so sorry that you missed it. I know that this is a bundle deal that's usually once a year that I participate in. So be sure to grab a spot on my email list. I'll replace the link with that, and that way you will not miss the next one. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this information was helpful to you to get task boxes going right away with these easy to implement ideas. And I will catch you next time on the Special Educators Resource Room. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'm dying to ask, what'd you think? Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe buttons so that you never miss an episode. You can find the show notes and links for everything mentioned in this episode at positivelylearningblog.com. See you next week for more special education solutions.